In Coldwater Correctional Facility, a black inmate was about to be targeted during a routine inspection. Only this time, the white prison guard's baton came down with witnesses watching. What started as a supposed contraband check spiraled when Sergeant Ray Kincaid planted a shiv and unleashed a brutal beating. Andre Coates wasn't your typical inmate. He was a former Army medic, wrongfully incarcerated after a botched plea deal. For 5 years, he had endured Coldwater's quiet punishments with military discipline, known for his calm leadership, medical skills, and refusal to bend to corrupt authority. When Kincaid orchestrated a vicious resistance narrative and beat Andre half to death, he had no idea he was messing with a man who inspired silent loyalty across racial lines. Andre didn't scream. He didn't fight back. But his silence, and the surveillance tape Warden Dent quietly saved, would set off a chain reaction the guards couldn't contain. What began as an abuse of power meant to humiliate one man would become a reckoning that exposed Coldwater's darkest truths. The entire prison would remember the day Sergeant Kincaid raised his baton, unaware that the warden saw everything. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The keys jingled at Sergeant Ray Kincaid's hip as he strode down E-Block, the fluorescent lights casting a sickly pallor over everything. It was 5:42 a.m., and the Mississippi summer already pressed against the concrete walls of Coldwater Correctional. "Rise and shine, ladies," Kincaid called out, voice flat and emotionless. His nightstick tapped methodically against the bars. Random inspection, standard procedure. There was nothing random about it. Behind him, 3 junior officers followed. Shane Dawley, 23 and 4 months into the job, kept his spine rigid and eyes forward, trying to mirror Kincaid's impassive expression. The older guard had been his mentor in navigating Coldwater's unwritten rules Dawley was still learning to stomach. "Block E, all inmates standing, hands visible," Kincaid announced into his radio. The inmates complied with practiced resignation. Dawley noticed how they stood with perfect posture, eyes down, hands open at their sides. Not defiant, not submissive, just waiting. Kincaid paused at E217, and Dawley felt something shift in the air. Inside stood Andre Coates, tall and lean, his stillness different from the other inmates, more dignified. The former Army medic's eyes met Kincaid's briefly before dropping to the floor. "Coates," Kincaid said, drawing out the name. "Open E217. The lock disengaged with a harsh buzz. "Step out, hands on the wall." Andre complied without hesitation, moving with a fluid economy of motion that spoke of military discipline. He assumed the position, legs spread, palms flat against the wall. "I need you and Garcia for this one, Dawley," Kincaid instructed, his voice carrying a subtle edge. "Reynolds, watch the tier." Kincaid began a methodical search, inspecting Andre's neatly made bunk, flipping the mattress, rifling through books, mostly military history and medical texts. "What's this?" Kincaid's voice hardened as he lifted a folded piece of paper from a book. Andre remained facing the wall. "Letter from my sister, sir, approved by mailroom last week." Kincaid unfolded it slowly. Funny how much contraband comes through in these approved letters. "What about this?" Kincaid held up an ordinary pencil. "Sharpened pretty good. Makes a decent shiv, doesn't it?" Andre's shoulders tensed almost imperceptibly. "Standard issue pencil, sir." "Turn around," Kincaid ordered. Andre complied, his face a careful mask. "You think you're smarter than me, don't you, Coates? All that yes sir, no sir bullshit. You got these other animals thinking you're some kind of example." "No, sir," Andre replied evenly. "Empty your pockets." Andre produced nothing but a small Bible, worn at the edges. "Check him," Kincaid ordered, stepping back. Garcia moved forward, patting down Andre with practiced efficiency. "He's clean, Sarge," Garcia confirmed. Kincaid nodded slowly. Then, with casual precision, he reached into his own pocket and pulled out a small, crude blade fashioned from a piece of metal food tray. What about this? He asked. Looks like it was under your mattress. Andre's eyes widened slightly. That's not mine, sir. So you're calling me a liar? The question hung in the air. Dolly felt cold sweat break out across his back. No, sir, Andre replied carefully. I'm just saying, shut your mouth, Kincaid snapped. Turn around, hands behind your back. In the administration wing, Harold Dent leaned forward in his leather chair, eyes fixed on his private monitor. The newly installed surveillance system had been his pet project, cameras in previously unmonitored areas, direct feeds to his office. Insurance for the institution, he'd told the board. In reality, it was insurance for Harold Dent. On screen, he watched the scene in E-Block unfold with clinical detachment. He'd been warden at Coldwater for 18 months, sent in to clean, up after a scandal. The governor had made it clear, no more headlines, no more lawsuits, no more federal oversight threats. A soft knock at his door. Enter, he called, without looking away from the screen. Lieutenant Deborah Voss stepped in, files in hand. Her eyes flickered to the monitor. The quarterly disciplinary reports, Warden, she said. Thank you, Lieutenant. Dent made no move to hide the screen. Kincaid's running a shakedown. Targeting Coates? Voss studied the footage. Apparently. He's one of our quieter inmates. Model prisoner record. Perhaps too quiet for Sergeant Kincaid's comfort, Dent mused. Back in E-Block, Andre had turned to face the wall again when Kincaid made his move. Resisting, he barked suddenly, though Andre stood perfectly still. Before Dolly could process what was happening, Kincaid's nightstick was in motion. The first blow caught Andre in the kidneys, buckling his knees. The second struck his shoulder. Andre didn't cry out. Not then. Sarge, Dolly started, but Garcia gripped his arm, silencing him with a warning look. Kincaid continued methodically. One blow, then another. When Andre fell to his knees, the sergeant switched to short, brutal strikes. Precision violence. Stop resisting, Kincaid commanded between blows, voice raised for anyone listening. Stop resisting. Down the tier, inmates began to shout, their voices rising in anger. Metal rattled as they shook their cell doors. Andre finally broke his silence when Kincaid's baton struck his ribs with a sickening crack. His cry echoed off the concrete walls. Dolly stood frozen, his naive worldview fracturing. This wasn't about order or discipline. This was something else entirely, something he'd been trained not to see. Call for a medical team, Kincaid ordered calmly, stepping back from Andre's crumpled form. Inmate assaulted an officer and resisted restraint. In his office, Warden Dent exhaled slowly, rewinding the footage to watch again. Interesting technique, he remarked coolly. Clean setup. Voss studied his face. Kincaid has a certain efficiency. Indeed. Dent's finger hovered over the delete button momentarily, then shifted to save the file. The question is whether that efficiency serves Coldwater's interests. Or yours? Voss asked, voice carefully neutral. On the screen, medical personnel arrived with a stretcher. Andre lay motionless as they secured a neck brace. Blood from a gash on his forehead left a thin trail on the concrete. The other inmates continued their protest, shouts now punctuated with threats. Kincaid keyed his radio. E-Block secure. 1 inmate to medical for self-inflicted injuries during restraint. Dolly backed away, hand shaking. His fingers came away smeared with a drop of Andre's blood, spatter from the beating. He'd witnessed but done nothing to stop. In the cells lining the corridor, dozens of eyes tracked Andre's departure. Silent witnesses. Waiting. Warden Dent closed the video file and stored it on his secure drive. As Voss left his office, he swiveled in his chair to gaze out over the prison yard. Somewhere within those walls, Andre Coates was bleeding on a stretcher, and an unchecked fire was beginning to smolder. The surveillance footage was now both shield and sword. It could protect Coldwater or end Kincaid's career. The true question wasn't what to do with the tape. It was what would benefit Harold Dent most in the long game. Behind him, on the monitor, new footage appeared. A trustee with a mop and bucket, mechanically erasing the blood from the concrete floor. Order restored. Routine maintained. For now. Blood stained the white sheet as Andre Coates lay unconscious in the infirmary. The prison medic, not a doctor, just a nurse with correctional training, worked efficiently, cataloging injuries with detached precision. 3 cracked ribs, potential kidney damage, concussion, lacerations to the scalp and face. Inmate resisted. Restraint, she noted in the log, parroting the official report without looking up. The words were mechanical, routine, a necessary fiction that kept Coldwater's machinery running smoothly. Outside in the corridors, whispers traveled faster than truth. By breakfast, every inmate knew. Andre Coates had been beaten half to death in E-Block. By lunch, the story had grown layers. Some said he'd fought back, others that he'd been targeted for organizing. A few claimed he might not make it. In the cramped kitchen prep area, Reggie Tone Wilson's hands trembled as he loaded breakfast, trays onto carts. 2 guards stood nearby, watching with heightened vigilance. "Heard about your boy Coates," one muttered to him. Tone kept his eyes on the trays. "Don't know what you mean." "Sure you don't," the guard smirked. "Just remember, there's order in this place for a reason." Tone's jaw clenched, but he continued working. The quiet rage burning in his chest wasn't new, but its intensity was. Andre had been the calm one, the voice of reason, the one who'd talked Tone down countless times. Andre believed in working within the system, in surviving with dignity. Look where that got him. As the morning shift ended, the guard break room filled with officers trading stories and unwinding. Shane Dolly sat in the corner, coffee untouched before him, replaying the scene in E-Block. The crack of the baton, the blood, his own paralysis. "Some action this morning, huh, rookie?" Officer Reynolds dropped into the chair opposite him, grinning. "Kincaid showed that uppity medic who runs this place." Dolly managed a weak nod. "First time seeing a proper restraint?" Reynolds asked, lowering his voice. "Don't sweat it. Some inmates need to be reminded of the pecking order, especially the ones who think they're better than the rest." "It was excessive," Dolly ventured cautiously. Reynolds' expression hardened. "Careful with that kind of talk. There's no excessive when it comes to maintaining control." Kincaid did what needed doing. As if summoned, Kincaid entered the break room. The conversations paused briefly before resuming with forced casualness. He poured coffee with steady hands, seemingly unbothered by the morning's violence. "Sergeant," an older guard called out, raising his mug. "Nice work restoring order in E-Block." Kincaid acknowledged the toast with a slight nod. "Just doing my job, Michaels. Can't let them forget who's in charge." His gaze swept the room, landing briefly on Dolly. Something cold and evaluating passed between them before Kincaid turned away. In the warden's office, Harold Dent rewatched the footage for the 3rd time, his expression unreadable. Latim Voss sat across from him, equally impassive. "The official report states Coates became combative during a routine contraband search," Dent said finally, pausing the video at the moment Kincaid produced the homemade shiv. "Kincaid claims he found this weapon." "And did he?" Voss asked, though they both knew the answer. "What matters is what can be proven," Dent replied. "This footage is problematic." "Problematic for whom?" Dent's lips thinned. "For everyone involved. The footage contradicts the official report. It shows excessive force against a compliant inmate. It shows a weapon being planted. It also gives you leverage," Voss noted quietly. "Indeed." Dent resumed the video, watching as Kincaid methodically beat Andre. "Our sergeant is effective at maintaining order, but his methods have always been old school. The board sent me here to modernize Coldwater, to clean up its image, while maintaining its profitability," Voss added. Dent nodded. "Kincaid represents the old guard, literally and figuratively. Men like him believe fear is the only language inmates understand." "And you disagree?" "I believe fear is inefficient in the long term. It builds resentment, creates resistance. Modern corrections is about control through incentives, not just punishment. Dent leaned back in his chair. Besides, the political winds are shifting. Prison reform is gaining traction. Being ahead of that curve could be advantageous. Voss studied him carefully. So you'll release the footage? I didn't say that. Dent closed the video file. Information is only valuable when used at the right moment, Lieutenant. Kincaid has powerful allies in the Guards Union, connections in the State Corrections Department. Moving against him without proper preparation would be unwise. So we wait. We observe. We prepare. Dent's smile didn't reach his eyes. And we keep this footage secure. The inmates are already talking, Voss warned. E-Block is on edge, the black population especially. Let them talk. Talk is harmless. Until it isn't. Dent conceded this with a slight nod. Keep the block rotations normal. Double the guards. In the yard and mess hall for the next few days. And have someone watch Wilson. He and Coates are close. And Kincaid? Tell him I'm pleased with his efficient handling of a potential security threat, Dent said smoothly. Let him think I'm an ally. Voss stood to leave. I'll handle the guards. I'm sure you will, Lieutenant. Dent's tone suggested he recognized her ambitions perfectly well. That's why you're valuable to this administration. Across the facility, Chaplain Elijah Brooks entered the infirmary, Bible in hand. He'd been Coldwater's spiritual guide for 11 years, walking a careful line between the inmates he ministered to and the administration that controlled access to them. I'm here to see Coates, he told the attending nurse. Prayer visit. She gestured toward the far bed. 15 minutes, he's sedated. Brooks nodded and made his way to Andre's bedside. He stopped short at the sight of the man's injuries. The swollen face, the bandaged ribs, the restraint securing him to the bed despite his unconscious state. Oh, son, Brooks whispered, settling into the chair beside the bed. What did they do to you? Andre's eyes fluttered open, unfocused. Chaplain, he managed, voice barely audible. Don't try to talk, Brooks said, taking Andre's hand. I'm just here to pray with you. Andre's fingers tightened almost imperceptibly around Brooks. They planted a shiv, he whispered. Kincaid, I didn't resist. I know, Brooks assured him. Everyone knows. Tell him not to do anything stupid. Tell him, patience. The chaplain nodded, though something inside him rebelled at the request. Patience? How much patience could one man be expected to have in the face of such injustice? How much turning of the other cheek? Brooks had spent decades preaching nonviolence, had marched with King in his youth, had believed deeply in moral authority as the path to change. But sitting beside Andre's broken body, those convictions felt hollow, academic. I'll tell him, he promised anyway. In the laundry facility, Tone Wilson sorted linens with mechanical precision, his mind elsewhere. A Latino inmate named Vargas sidled up next to him. Heard about your friend, Vargas murmured. That's some cold shit. Tone nodded slightly. Kincaid's been doing this for years, Vargas continued. Targets anyone who has respect, anyone who might be organizing, especially the brothers. I know. So what are you going to do about it? Tone glanced around, making sure no guards were in earshot. What can we do? They got the guns, the batons, the keys. But we got numbers, Vargas replied. And now we got something else, anger. The whole yard's talking. Even the white boys in D Block are saying it crossed a line. Tone considered this. Andre would caution restraint, would warn against anything that might extend their sentences or get more people hurt. But Andre wasn't here. Andre was in the infirmary with tubes in his arms because he'd followed the rules. Pass the word, Tone decided, his voice low and controlled. Not just to our people, to everyone. Andre didn't deserve this. None of us do. He folded a sheet with careful precision. And we're done taking it. What's the play? Vargas asked. I'm still working on that part. For now, we watch and wait. In the staff corridor, Dolly caught up with another junior officer, Martinez, who'd been at Coldwater almost a year. "Can I talk to you?" Dolly asked, voice low. "About what happened in E Block." Martinez glanced around nervously. "Not here, Ann." They ducked into an empty supply closet. "What Kincaid did," Dolly began. "Stop," Martinez cut him off. "Just stop right there. Whatever you think you saw, you didn't see it. You understand?" But it was wrong. Coates wasn't resisting. The shiv was planted. "Listen to me," Martinez hissed. "There are two kinds of guards at Coldwater. Those who back up their brothers, and those who don't last. Which one are you? I didn't sign up to watch men get beaten for no reason. You signed up to keep order in a place full of murderers and rapists. Sometimes that gets messy. Coates isn't... It doesn't matter who Coates is." Martinez grabbed Dolly's shoulder. "What matters is that if you start questioning Kincaid, you're questioning all of us. The inmates will notice, they'll exploit it. People will get hurt, including you." Dolly fell silent, the weight of complicity settling on his shoulders like a physical burden. "Look," Martinez said, softening slightly. "Your first beatdown is always the hardest. It gets easier." "That's what I'm afraid of," Dolly muttered. As evening count approached, Chaplain Brooks made his way to the laundry facility, finding Tone just as his shift ended. "Andre's asking for you," he said quietly. "He's stable. Conscious. They letting people visit?" Tone asked skeptically. "No, but I'll make it happen tomorrow. He has a message for you." "Let me guess. Stay calm, keep my head down, trust the system?" Tone's voice was bitter. Brooks sighed. "Something like that. With all due respect, Chaplain, the system is what put him in that infirmary bed." "I know," Brooks admitted, surprising them both. "But getting yourself thrown in solitary won't help him." Tone studied the older man carefully. "You've been here a long time, Chaplain. Tell me the truth. Does it ever get better? Does playing by their rules ever change anything?" Brooks wanted to offer comfort, to fall back on familiar platitudes about patience and faith. But the image of Andre's bruised face haunted him. "I don't know anymore," he confessed. "But I do know this. Whatever happens next, it needs to be smart. For Andre's sake." Tone nodded slowly. "I hear you." He turned to go, then paused. "They still got cameras in the chapel for evening prayer service?" "No. Budget cuts last year. It's one of the few unmonitored spaces left." "Good to know, Chaplain, good to know." As darkness fell over Coldwater Correctional, the facility settled into its nighttime routine. In his office, Warden Dent locked the surveillance footage in, a secure digital vault, another piece on his personal chessboard. Lateem Voss made her rounds, noting the undercurrent of tension in each cell block, assessing potential flashpoints. In the guards' break room, Kincaid held court, his authority seemingly untouchable. And in their cells, inmates passed whispered messages from block to block, a current of resistance flowing beneath the surface of enforced calm. Andre didn't deserve it. None of us do. Enhanced security protocols will remain in effect until further notice. The announcement crackled through Coldwater's PA system as inmates lined up for morning count. Lieutenant Voss's voice continued, clinical and detached. Blocks D through G will operate on restricted movement schedules. Yard privileges are suspended for all inmates in E Block pending review. Murmurs rippled through the line. E Block, Andre's block, predominantly black inmates. The message wasn't subtle. "Silence during count," Officer Reynolds barked, slamming his baton against the wall. 3 days had passed since Andre's beating. 3 days of escalating restrictions, each justified as precautionary measures. Reduced meal times, limited shower access, extra pat-downs. The pressure was building, cell by cell, block by block. Sergeant Kincaid surveyed the inmates from his position at the end of the corridor, eyes cold and watchful. He'd added extra security checks, confiscated more personal items, denied more privileges, all within regulation, all technically justified, all deliberately targeted. "I want every inch of E-Block searched again," he instructed his team after count concluded. "Cells, common areas, every vent and drain. Someone's passing messages between blocks. His gaze settled on Officer Dawley. "You're on E-Block today?" "Dawley, keep your eyes open." Dawley nodded stiffly. "Yes, Sergeant." "Problem with that assignment?" Kincaid asked, voice dangerously soft. "No, Sergeant." "Good, because I'd hate to think you weren't a team player." Kincaid stepped closer, lowering his voice. "People notice things in here, Dawley. Inmates notice. Guards notice. I notice." The threat hung between them, unspoken but clear. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. In the infirmary, Andre Coates lay awake, staring at the ceiling. His body was a catalog of pain, cracked ribs that made each breath a struggle, kidney bruising that turned his urine rust-colored, headaches that pulsed behind his eyes in steady waves. The nurse had offered painkillers. He'd refused them. The pain kept him sharp. The infirmary door opened and Warden Dent entered, followed by a staff doctor who visited the facility once weekly. Dent approached Andre's bed, hands clasped behind his back, expression neutral. "Mr. Coates," he greeted, "Dr. Weinstein is here to evaluate your condition." Andre said nothing, eyes fixed on the ceiling. "The doctor informs me you've been refusing pain medication," Dent continued. "That's your right, of course, but it will slow your recovery." Still nothing. "Your return to general population depends on medical clearance." Dent tried again. "Cooperation speeds that process." Andre turned, his head slightly, meeting Dent's gaze for the first time. His silence was deliberate, calculated. Let them talk, let them explain, let them justify. Dent's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Frustration, perhaps, or respect. "I understand Chaplain Brooks visited yesterday," the warden said. "If you prefer to speak with him, that can be arranged." Andre closed his eyes, ending the conversation. Outside the infirmary, Dent turned to Dr. Weinstein. "How much longer until he can return to his cell?" "Medically?" "Another week at least," the doctor replied. "Those ribs need time." "We don't have a week," Dent said. "The situation is escalating. I need him back in population, either as a calming influence or as a demonstration that the system works." "A demonstration?" Weinstein raised an eyebrow. "The man was beaten severely. That's not exactly a ringing endorsement of your system." Dent's expression hardened. "Just clear him as soon as possible, doctor. Coldwater thanks you for your service." In his office later that morning, Dent sat at his computer, reviewing surveillance footage from the past 3 months. The new system had retained older recordings, creating an unintended archive of Coldwater's daily operations. What he saw disturbed him, not because it was shocking, but because it was routine. Kincaid wasn't unique. The pattern of selective enforcement, of intimidation, of carefully orchestrated resistance, played out across multiple guards, multiple blocks. Black inmates received more citations, more searches, more compliance corrections. The racial disparity was unmistakable once you looked for it. Dent inserted a flash drive into his computer, copied select files, then locked it in his desk drawer. Insurance, he told himself, political leverage. But something else nagged at him, a realization that the system he'd been sent to polish and protect was fundamentally corroded. He pushed the thought away. His job wasn't to fix Coldwater. It was to advance Harold Dent. In E-Block, Dawley supervised lunch distribution, watching as inmates collected their trays and returned to their cells to eat. Another temporary restriction. He noticed how the portions seemed smaller than in other blocks, how the servers were instructed to rush the line. Tone Wilson approached the serving line, tray extended. The kitchen trustee, a white inmate from D Block, slid his tray forward with deliberate slowness, maintaining eye contact. A beat too long. Something passed between them. Not an object, but information. "Moving there, Wilson," Dawley said automatically. Tone took his tray, glancing at Dawley with an evaluating look. "Yes, sir, just getting my government-mandated nutrition." As he passed, he added quietly, Not hungry today, Officer Dolly, or just not for what they're serving here in particular. The question wasn't about food. Dolly felt it like a probe, testing for weakness, for conscience. Move along, he responded, but without heat. Throughout the day, Dolly observed the pattern repeat, small moments of solidarity between inmates from different blocks, different races. Notes hidden in laundry, words exchanged during brief, sanctioned movements. A new language of resistance developing under the guards' watchful eyes. He also saw the countering pressure. Kincaid and his loyal officers conducting random searches that deliberately destroyed personal items, confiscating family photos as potential gang identifiers, reducing shower time as a water conservation measure. Found this in cell 226. Officer Reynolds announced during shift change, holding up a scrap of paper. Looks like they're planning something. Kincaid examined the paper, which bore a crude drawing of the mess hall with an X marked at several tables. Put 226 in solitary, he ordered, inciting unrest. That's Peterson's cell, Dolly noted. He's 67 in for tax fraud. Kincaid's eyes narrowed. You questioning my assessment, officer? No, Sergeant. Just confirming. Confirmed. Then, solitary. Kincaid's gaze held a warning. And, Dolly, you're on E-Block again tomorrow. Maybe sometime with these animals will clarify your perspective. In the chapel, Chaplain Brooks led evening prayer, his voice carrying through the small unmonitored space. 16 inmates attended, more than usual and from various blocks. Tone Wilson sat in the back row, head bowed but eyes alert. Let us pray for healing, Brooks intoned. For Andre Coates, still recovering in the infirmary. For our community, in these trying times. As the service concluded, inmates filed out slowly. Tone remained behind, approaching the altar. How is he? He asked quietly, conscious in pain. Brooks glanced at the door, not speaking to the administration. Smart man. They want to move him back to population soon, Brooks warned. Dent's getting nervous. Tone absorbed this. Good, we're ready. Ready for what? Brooks asked, concern etching his features. For Andre's return. For a proper welcome. Tone's expression revealed nothing. A respectful one. Tone, whatever you're planning. Nothing that violates your teachings, Chaplain, Tone assured him. Just a reminder that we're still human, that we still have dignity. Brooks wanted to press further, but footsteps approached the chapel door. Officer Martinez appeared, gesturing impatiently. Time's up, he announced. Back to your cells. As Tone passed Martinez, the guard shoved him slightly. Praying won't save you, Wilson. Tone absorbed the push without reaction. Maybe not, but it keeps me focused. In the administration wing, Lieutenant Voss knocked on Dent's open door. You wanted the incident reports from last month? Dent gestured for her to enter. Yes. I'm conducting a review of our disciplinary procedures. May I ask why? Voss set the files on his desk. Let's call it due diligence, Dent replied. The Coates situation has raised questions about our protocols. Questions from whom? Voss's voice sharpened. There's been no external inquiry. Not yet, Dent said. But preparation is prudence, Lieutenant. He tapped the files. These reports, how many include claims of inmate resistance that resulted in force? Voss considered the question carefully. Most of them. It's standard procedure when force is applied. And how many of those claims do you personally believe? A long silence stretched between them. I follow the chain of command, Voss said finally. My beliefs are irrelevant. A diplomatic answer, Dent observed. But let me be clear. If external oversight arrives, diplomacy may not be enough. Everyone from the officers to administration could face scrutiny. Including you, Voss noted. Indeed. Dent leaned back in his chair. Which is why I'm exploring options that protect the institution while demonstrating our commitment to reform. And Kincaid? Sergeant Kincaid is a valuable member of our security team, Dent replied carefully. But no individual is more important than the facility's future. Voss absorbed this, understanding the implicit message. I'll keep that in mind, Warden. After she left, Dent unlocked his drawer and removed the flash drive, turning it over in his hands thoughtfully before returning it to its hiding place. The smoke was in the walls now. The only question was whether to let it build or release it in a controlled burn. Night fell over Coldwater. In their cells, inmates lay awake, passing messages through plumbing pipes, through whispers during count, through coded movements in common areas. The plan took shape, cell by cell, block by block. In the infirmary, Andre finally spoke, not to the medical staff or the guards, but to a kitchen trustee who delivered his dinner tray. Tell Tone I'm ready, he whispered. Tell him I'm coming back tomorrow. In his own cell, Dolly stared at the ceiling of his small apartment in the staff housing wing. His uniform hung on the door, the badge catching the dim light. 4 months ago, it had represented stability, purpose. Now it felt like a mark of complicity. His phone lay on the nightstand, the number for the state's Corrections Oversight Board displayed on the screen. He'd found it earlier that day, finger hovering over the call button before setting it aside. At the far end of the staff housing, Kincaid sat at his kitchen table, cleaning his service baton with methodical precision. 18 years at Coldwater had taught him to read the signs. The quiet was too organized, too purposeful. Something was coming. Let it come, he thought. He'd been controlling animals like Coates and Wilson for his entire career. Nothing would change. In his luxurious off-site home, Warden Dent poured himself a generous whiskey, reviewing his options. The flash drive contained enough evidence to end several careers, including Kincaid's. Using it would demonstrate his reform credentials, potentially positioning him for advancement to the state level. But timing was everything, and control was paramount. Morning would bring Andre Coates back to general population, back to E-Block, back to a facility simmering with resentment and rage. The smoke in the walls was thickening, seeking release. Dent sipped his whiskey, weighing combustion against control, career against conscience. By the time the glass was empty, he'd made his decision. Coldwater would change, but on Harold Dent's terms, and the first move would come with the morning count. Medical discharge E217, Coates Andre, returned to general population. The order came down at 600, just as the morning shift changed. Dr. Weinstein had signed off reluctantly, noting in the file that the patient was minimally ambulatory and should be assigned light duty status for at least 2 weeks. 2 guards escorted Andre from the infirmary, one on each arm, though he needed no restraint. His face remained impassive despite the pain that radiated with each step. 5 days after Kincaid's assault, the bruising had shifted from purple to sickly yellow-green across his cheekbone and jaw. He walked with careful, measured movements, one arm held protectively against his taped ribs. Word of his return spread through Coldwater's blocks like an electrical current. Whispers passed during morning count, during breakfast service, during work assignments. A plan 6 days in the making would finally activate. Andre returned to his cell without comment, accepting the rumpled bedding and scattered personal items, evidence of repeated searches during his absence. Officer Dolly supervised the transfer, noting how other inmates found reasons to pass by E217, each offering a nod, a raised fist, a quiet, welcome back. No words exchanged, but a message clearly conveyed: solidarity. Medical says light duty, Dolly informed Andre, keeping his voice professional but not harsh. You're excused from work detail, but you'll attend mess with your block. Andre nodded once, the first acknowledgement he'd offered any guard. There's been some tension while you were gone, Dolly added, lowering his voice. Extra security measures. Andre's eyes met his, evaluating, testing. Appreciate the update, officer. Dolly hesitated, wanting to say more, about the beating, about Kincaid, about his own growing doubts. But the wall between guard and inmate remained impenetrable, built from centuries of institutional mistrust. He simply nodded and continued his rounds. In the surveillance room, Warden Dent observed Andre's return on multiple cameras, noting the subtle interactions, the silent communication flowing between cell blocks. He'd spent enough time in corrections to recognize the signs. Something coordinated was unfolding. "Have the mess hall cameras been upgraded?" he asked the monitoring officer. "Yes, sir. New system covers all angles now." "Good. Record all feeds during lunch service." At precisely 11:30, E-Block was released for lunch. Andre joined the shuffle of inmates moving down the corridor, Tone Wilson falling into step beside him. Their conversation appeared casual to watching. "Guards. Good to have you back, brother," Tone said quietly. "You got everyone's attention now." "That's not what I wanted," Andre replied. "Maybe not. But it's what we needed." Tone's voice was low, intense. "The plan is set. Every block is ready. Just follow my lead." Andre studied his friend's face. "No violence, Tone. That's a line we don't cross." "Trust me," Tone assured him. "This is about dignity, not blood." They entered the mess hall, joining the methodical lunch line. Andre noticed the increased guard presence immediately. Kincaid stood at the entrance. Reynolds and Martinez patrolled the perimeter. Dolly supervised the serving line. The air felt charged, pregnant with anticipation. One by one, inmates collected their trays and dispersed to tables segregated by unwritten racial boundaries that had hardened during Andre's absence. He received his food last, the servers giving him slightly larger portions, another silent message of respect. Andre took his seat at a central table. Tone sat across from him. Around them, other inmates began their meals with practiced indifference. In the surveillance room, Dent watched the scene unfold with growing interest. "Something's off," he muttered. "They're too ordered, too quiet." The mess hall clock read 11:47 when Tone caught Andre's eye and gave an almost imperceptible nod. Andre took a deep breath, steadying himself for whatever came next. Tone stood suddenly, tray in hand. The movement drew immediate attention from the guards. Kincaid stepped forward, hand moving to his baton, but instead of causing disruption, Tone simply turned his tray upside down on the table. Food splattered across the surface. He then sat down, hands folded, eyes forward. The gesture rippled outward. At the next table, 3 black inmates stood simultaneously, inverting their trays before sitting in perfect stillness. Then 5 more at another table, then dozens across the hall. One by one, in a choreographed wave, every black inmate in the mess hall, over 100 men, turned their food trays upside down and sat motionless, eyes forward, hands visible, completely silent. No chants, no shouts, no violence. Just the deliberate sacrifice of their only decent meal of the day, spilled before them in mute protest. Officer Reynolds moved first, striding toward Tone's table. "Clean that up now." Tone didn't respond, didn't even blink. Beside him, Andre sat with the same disciplined stillness he'd maintained in the infirmary, present but unreachable. "I said clean it up," Reynolds repeated, voice rising. When no response came, he grabbed Tone's shoulder. "That's a direct order, inmate." Kincaid marched over, face darkening. "On your feet, Wilson. That's destruction of state property." Tone remained, seated, expression neutral. Andre's eyes fixed on some middle distance, ignoring Kincaid's presence entirely. Throughout the mess hall, the scene repeated, guards issuing commands, inmates responding with absolute, disciplined silence. It was not the chaos of a riot, but something more unsettling. Organized non-compliance. "Get them out of here," Kincaid barked to his officers. "Move them back to their cells." No inmate resisted being pulled to their feet, being cuffed, being escorted out, but neither did they help. Each had to be physically lifted and moved, creating a logistical nightmare. Moving 200 men who refused to walk on their own would take hours. In the surveillance room, Dent watched with a mixture of apprehension and reluctant admiration. This was no impulsive outburst. This was strategic, coordinated resistance, resistance that would be difficult to punish without appearing tyrannical. His phone rang. Kincaid. "Warden, we have a situation in the mess hall." The sergeant's voice was tight with barely controlled fury. "Mass insubordination. We need authorization for extraction teams, riot gear." "I'm watching the feeds, Sergeant," Dent replied calmly. "I don't see a riot. I see inmates sitting quietly. They're refusing direct orders. They've wasted state resources. Have any of them threatened staff, engaged in violence, destroyed anything beyond their own lunches?" Kincaid's frustration was palpable through the phone. "It's a coordinated action, sir. A direct challenge to authority." "Handle it according to protocol, Sergeant," Dent instructed. "Identify the ringleaders for administrative segregation. Return the rest to their cells in an orderly fashion." "Ringleaders?" Kincaid's voice dripped with sarcasm. "Hard to identify. Leadership when no one's speaking." "I have faith in your investigative abilities," Dent replied, ending the call. Lieutenant Voss entered the surveillance room moments later. "You're letting this continue?" Dent gestured to the screens. "What would you have me do, Lieutenant? Send in riot teams against men sitting quietly with their hands visible? How would that footage play in an oversight hearing?" Voss studied the monitors. "It's Coates. His return triggered this. Undoubtedly. But notice, he's not leading it. He's participating, but Wilson is the one giving the signals." Dent zoomed one camera in on Andre's face. "Interesting dynamic." "We could isolate them both," Voss suggested. "Administrative segregation for organizing unrest." "We could," Dent agreed, "but that might be exactly what they want. Martyrdom. Besides, this form of protest is inconvenient, but ultimately harmless." He tapped his fingers thoughtfully on the desk. "Let's be strategic here. Allow Kincaid to identify 10 participants for disciplinary action, but not Coates or Wilson." "Not the actual leaders?" Voss asked, surprised. "We keep them in population where they can be watched," Dent explained. "Meanwhile, we demonstrate that actions have consequences by punishing others. It will create division in their ranks." Voss nodded slowly, understanding the calculated cruelty of the approach. "Divide and control." "Precisely." In the mess hall, the protest continued in eerie silence. Officer Dawley found himself stationed near Andre and Tone as guards began the laborious process of removing inmates. "This isn't going to end well," he said quietly. "Kincaid's out for blood." Andre's eyes flicked toward him briefly, the first acknowledgement that he'd even heard. Beside him, Tone remained focused ahead, unresponsive. "I saw what happened," Dawley continued, voice barely audible. "In the block. It wasn't right." Still no response, but something shifted in Andre's posture. A slight relaxation, perhaps. Recognition. When his radio crackled with instructions to move to another section, Dawley hesitated, then leaned closer. "Be careful," he murmured before walking away. It took nearly 3 hours to clear the mess hall. Most inmates were returned to their cells without incident. 10, selected seemingly at random, but actually from a list Kincaid had been cultivating, of troublemakers, were escorted to administrative segregation. Not Andre, not Tone, just as Dent had instructed. By evening count, Coldwater had resumed its normal operations, though the undercurrent of tension remained palpable. In E-Block, Andre sat on his bunk, the day's events replaying in his mind. The protest had exceeded expectations. Near universal participation among black inmates, with several Latino and even a few white inmates joining in solidarity. Tone appeared at his cell during evening recreation period. 10 brothers in the hole, he reported quietly. None of our key people. They're being strategic, Andre observed, trying to create resentment. Well, it won't work. Tone glanced around, ensuring no guards were in earshot. We've got their attention now. What's the next move? Andre considered the question carefully. Escalation was inevitable, but it needed direction, purpose. We document everything, he decided. Every shakedown, every random search, every denied privilege. Build the case. For what? The courts don't care about us. Not for the courts, for ourselves. Andre met Tone's gaze directly. For now we hold the line. Small acts of resistance. Nothing they can punish severely. Nothing that gives them an excuse for violence. We wear them down with dignity. Tone absorbed this, clearly wanting more immediate action but respecting Andre's judgment. And then we find a way to get the truth out. Andre lowered his voice further. We do this smart, or we die. After recreation period ended, Dolly found himself drawn to the chapel. Chaplain Brooks sat in the front pew, Bible open but unread on his lap. Officer Dolly, Brooks acknowledged without turning. Seeking spiritual guidance? Something like that. Dolly sat heavily in the pew behind him. How do you do it, Chaplain? All these years in this place seeing what happens and still believing? Brooks closed his Bible. Who says I still believe? At least not in the system. But you preach forgiveness, patience. I preach survival, Brooks corrected. And sometimes survival requires endurance more than resistance. Dolly rubbed his face tiredly. I witnessed a man being beaten for nothing, and today I watched hundreds risk punishment to protest it. I'm supposed to be one of the good guys. Are you? Brooks asked quietly. I thought I was. Maybe the question isn't whether you're good, Brooks suggested. Maybe it's whether you're complicit. The word hung between them, heavy with implication. What should I do? Dolly asked. Finally. I can't answer that for you, son. Brooks stood, placing a hand briefly on Dolly's shoulder. But I will say this. Moral courage is rarely rewarded in places built on moral compromise. In the administration wing, Kincaid stormed into Dent's office without knocking. With all due respect, Warden, we need to crush this now. Dent looked up from his paperwork with practiced calm. Crush what exactly? This rebellion, it's coordinated, it's spreading. We need facility-wide lockdown, suspension of all privileges, extraction teams ready. Based on what justification, Sergeant? Inmates refusing to eat lunch? Kincaid's jaw tightened. You know damn well what this is. It started after Coates got himself injured. Got himself injured? Dent interrupted, expression unchanged but voice sharpening slightly. An interesting characterization of events. Something in his tone made Kincaid pause. Coates resisted during a routine search. The official report. Yes, the official report. Dent leaned back in his chair. Tell me, Sergeant, how long have you been at Coldwater? 18 years, sir. Then you understand the delicate balance required to maintain order. Sometimes that means measured response rather than overwhelming force. Dent steepled his fingers. I'll authorize heightened security measures, reduced recreation, additional cell inspections, suspension of commissary privileges, but not full lockdown. Not yet. Kincaid studied the warden's face, sensing something beneath the bureaucratic caution. What aren't you telling me, sir? Nothing relevant to your duties, Sergeant. Dent's smile was thin. Carry out the security measures I've authorized. Monitor for additional disturbances. Report directly to Lieutenant Voss. Voss? Kincaid didn't bother hiding his displeasure. With respect, sir, I've handled security in this facility since before either of you arrived. And your experience is valued, Dent assured him smoothly. But chain of command must be maintained, especially in times of tension. After Kincaid left, barely containing his resentment, Dent opened his desk drawer and removed the flash drive. Contingency plans required timing, and timing required patience. In her office, Lieutenant Voss received calls from each block, compiling reports of the day's events. The protest had been limited to the mess hall, but its impact reverberated throughout Coldwater. Guards were on edge, inmates watchful. The balance of power hadn't shifted, but for the first time in memory, it had been visibly questioned. When her phone rang again, she was surprised to hear Officer Dolly's voice. Lieutenant, I need to speak with you, he said, voice tight with resolve. about what happened in E-Block, about what really happened to Andre Coates. Voss sat straighter, instantly alert. Officer Dawley, I'd advise caution before making statements that contradict official reports. I can't be silent anymore, Dawley insisted. What happened wasn't right, and today's protest? It's just the beginning. Come to my office tomorrow morning, Voss instructed after a moment's consideration. We'll discuss your concerns. She hung up and immediately dialed Dent's extension, another piece moving on the board. Night settled over Coldwater Correctional. In their cells, inmates spoke in hushed tones about the day's victory, small but significant. In the guards' break room, officers speculated about further unrest, about weakness in the administration, about the changing atmosphere. And in E-Block, Andre Coates lay on his bunk, eyes open in the darkness, mapping out the long game. The silent protest had been merely an opening move, a demonstration of unity and discipline. What came next would require even greater courage from men who had already lost nearly everything, except perhaps their dignity. Level 5 lockdown protocols are now in effect. All inmates will remain in cells. All privileges are suspended until further notice. The announcement came at 0500, jolting inmates from sleep. The timing wasn't accidental. Kincaid had chosen the hour deliberately, a psychological tactic to maximize disorientation and stress. He'd waited barely 12 hours after the silent protest to implement his response. Though Dent had denied, his request for facility-wide measures, a security incident in D-Block, a sharpened toothbrush discovered during a cell search, had given him the justification he needed for targeted action. By 0530, a team of 16 guards in riot gear moved through E-Block methodically. Each cell door slid open with a metallic clang. Each inmate stood against the back wall, hands visible. Each cell was systematically stripped, mattresses slashed, open for contraband checks, personal photos torn from walls, books confiscated as potential materials for coded communication. All items on the floor, Officer Reynolds instructed the occupant of E204, a young man named Jackson serving 5 years for possession. Strip to your underwear. Jackson complied silently, jaw tight with suppressed anger as guards tore through his few possessions. A photo of his daughter was crumpled and tossed aside. Letters from home were scattered. His Bible, the same one Andre carried, was added to a growing pile of confiscated items. Is this necessary? Officer Dawley asked quietly as he and Martinez moved to the next cell. Orders, Martinez replied simply. Full compliance inspection. Down the tier, a commotion erupted. An older inmate named Wilkins had protested when guards confiscated his medically prescribed glasses. The response was immediate. 2 officers pinned him to the wall while a third delivered compliance strikes with a baton. Dawley felt sick, watching it unfold. This wasn't security, it was retribution. Punishment for the protest, for the audacity of silent resistance. In his cell, Andre sat perfectly still as Kincaid personally supervised the search. The sergeant's eyes gleamed with vindictive satisfaction as he methodically destroyed what little Andre possessed, overturning his small desk, ripping pages from his military history book, crushing the pencils he used for letters home. Nothing to say, Coates? Kincaid taunted, stepping close. No complaints about your treatment? Andre maintained his silence, eyes fixed on the middle distance. Your little demonstration yesterday, Kincaid continued. Impressive organization. Almost like military discipline. He picked up Andre's discharge papers from the Army. Medic, right? Used to giving orders, having them followed. Still nothing. Here's what you don't understand, Kincaid said, leaning closer. In here, there's only one chain of command, and it ends with me. He deliberately tore the discharge papers in half, dropping the pieces at Andre's feet. Throughout the block, similar scenes played out with escalating intensity. By 0700, the destruction was complete. Cells had been stripped to concrete and metal. Inmates stood in underwear, surrounded by the wreckage of their meager possessions while guards took inventory of contraband, anything from extra socks to hand-drawn birthday cards. Contraband collection complete, Reynolds reported to Kincaid. 37 items confiscated. Good. Kincaid nodded. Restricted rations for 3 days. No shower privileges. No recreation. In the surveillance room, Warden Dent watched the footage with growing concern. The systematic humiliation went beyond security protocols into something darker. Collective punishment designed to break spirits rather than maintain order. His phone rang. Lieutenant Voss. "Sir, you need to see this," she said without preamble. D Block just boiled over. Dent switched camera feeds to see chaos unfolding in D Block's common area. An inmate had lashed out during a similar cell search, knocking a guard to the ground. Others had joined the fray. Riot teams moved in with pepper spray and batons. "Kincaid authorized this level of force?" Dent demanded. "Yes, sir. Standard response to violence against staff." "There's nothing standard about this, Lieutenant. This is escalation by design." Dent grabbed his jacket. "I'm coming down." By the time Dent reached D Block, the confrontation had left 3 inmates, bloodied and unconscious. One guard, Officer Parker, had been stabbed in the side with a makeshift weapon fashioned from a broken broomstick, not life-threatening, but serious enough to warrant outside medical attention. "Who authorized the full block search?" Dent demanded, pulling Kincaid aside. "I did, sir," Kincaid replied unapologetically. "After yesterday's coordinated insubordination, we needed to reassert control." "By creating more incidents?" Dent gestured to the chaos around them. "A guard has been stabbed. This will trigger a state investigation." "With all due respect, Warden, that's exactly what we need. Evidence of the threat we're facing. Justification for enhanced measures." Dent studied the sergeant's face, seeing not concern but satisfaction. The stabbing wasn't an unintended consequence, it was a desired outcome. Proof of danger. Justification for force. "Secure the blocks," Dent ordered. "Full count in 1 hour. I want detailed reports of every item confiscated, every incident of resistance." "And the inmates involved in the assault?" "Solitary. Full restraints. By the book, Sergeant." Dent's emphasis on the last words carried clear warning. Every action documented. While medical teams treated the injured, Dolly found himself assigned to escort duty, transferring inmates to solitary confinement. Among them was Tone Wilson, though he'd been nowhere near the D Block incident. "This is wrong," Dolly muttered, as they walked the corridor. "You weren't even involved." Tone gave him a measured look. "None of us are involved until they decide we are, officer." "Keep moving, Wilson," Dolly replied, louder this time for the benefit of nearby guards. But as they passed a blind spot in the camera coverage, a corner Dolly had carefully noted. During previous shifts, he whispered, "They're spinning the stabbing," calling it a coordinated attack. Tone absorbed this information without visible reaction. Not surprising. It wasn't, though, was it? Coordinated? Tone's eyes met his briefly. "What do you think?" "In solitary, a separate building housing, 30 individual cells designed for isolation. Tone was processed efficiently, stripped, searched, issued a paper gown, confined to a concrete box with nothing but a metal toilet, a concrete shelf for a bed, and a thin blanket. 23 hours in cell, 1 hour recreation," the supervising officer informed him. "No contact with other inmates. Disciplinary hearing in 15 days. The door closed with finality, the sound echoing through the silent corridor. 6 cells down. Andre had already been processed in similar fashion, despite having shown no resistance during the morning's raid. His ribs throbbed from the rough handling, the recent beating's injuries re-aggravated by guards who knew exactly where to apply pressure. Alone in his cell, he finally allowed himself to close his eyes to feel the full weight of the situation. The silent protest had been met with overwhelming force. Escalation had been immediate and brutal. The path of dignified resistance suddenly seemed naive, insufficient against institutional violence determined to crush any challenge to its authority. Hours passed. In the administration wing, reports flowed in from each block, multiple incidents requiring force, dozens of inmates in solitary, One guard hospitalized. The narrative was crystallizing. Organized inmate violence, heroic staff response, necessary security measures. Latin Voss knocked on Dent's open door. "Officer Dawley is here, sir. About his concerns." Dent nodded. "Send him in, and find out when Sergeant Kincaid is due for a break. I need to speak with him as well." Dawley entered, visibly tense but determined. "Warden, I need to report what I witnessed in E-Block. The assault on Andre Coates wasn't justified. He wasn't resisting. Kincaid planted that weapon." "Serious allegations, officer," Dent observed, gesturing for him to sit. "Why come forward now?" "Because what's happening isn't right," Dawley said, voice tight with emotion. "This morning's raids, the beatings, it's all part of the same pattern. Targeted enforcement against black inmates. Provocation disguised as security." "Do you have evidence beyond your testimony?" Dent asked. "Because Sergeant Kincaid has 18 years of service records backing his version of events. I know what I saw. As did Officer Garcia, whose report directly contradicts yours." Dent leaned forward. "I'm not dismissing your concerns, Dawley, but accusations without corroboration are problematic. There's the surveillance footage," Dawley pressed, "from E-Block that morning." Something flickered in Dent's eyes, surprise perhaps that Dawley knew about the cameras. "That footage is part of an ongoing administrative review." "So it exists," Dawley noted, "and it shows what really happened." A long silence stretched between them. "Officer Dawley," Dent finally said, "your commitment to truth is commendable, but timing and procedure matter in corrections. There are channels for reporting misconduct." "Channels that go nowhere," Dawley responded bitterly. "Everyone knows that." "Perhaps," Dent acknowledged. "But acting outside those channels can be career-limiting." He studied the young guard thoughtfully. "I'll reassign you to administrative wing for the next rotation. Away from E-Block. Away from Kincaid." It's not negotiable," Dent cut him off. "Consider it protective reassignment while I review your concerns." After Dawley left, visibly frustrated, Dent opened his desk drawer and removed the flash drive again. The young officer's testimony aligned with what the footage showed. A potential ally, or a potential liability. The sun had begun to set when Dent made his way to the solitary confinement unit. He nodded to the supervising officer. "I need to speak with Coates, alone." "Yes, sir." The officer unlocked cell 9 and stepped aside. Andre sat on the concrete bench, paper gown crinkling as he straightened at Dent's entrance. His face remained impassive, but his eyes tracked the warden with careful attention. "Mr. Coates," Dent began. "I thought we should discuss recent events." Andre said nothing. "The incident in D-Block has escalated an already tense situation," Dent continued, unbothered by the silence. "Officer Parker is in the hospital. The State Corrections Department is sending investigators. This facility is now under intense scrutiny." He paused, studying Andre's face. "Your protest yesterday was clever. Disciplined. Impossible to punish severely while remaining within regulations. But the violence today? That crosses a line that changes everything." Andre spoke for the first time, voice rough from disuse. "There was no coordination, no plan for violence. Perhaps not from you," Dent acknowledged, "but others are less strategic, less patient." "Like Sergeant Kincaid?" Andre met Dent's gaze directly. This morning's raids weren't about security. They were punishment, provocation. An interesting perspective. Dent clasped his hands behind his back, and one I'm not entirely unsympathetic to. Andre's expression registered surprise before he controlled it. "You're an intelligent man." "Coates," Dent continued. "Military background, leadership qualities. You understand how institutions function, how power flows." "What do you want, Warden?" "The same thing you do," Dent replied. "Control, order, just through different methods. Our definitions of order seem to differ." Dent smiled thinly. "Perhaps. but we might find common ground on what constitutes excess, on where legitimate authority ends and abuse begins. Andre studied him carefully, sensing the unspoken offer beneath the words. You have something. I have many things, Mr. Coates. Information, influence, options. Dent moved toward the door. Consider your next steps carefully. Escalation has consequences for everyone involved. Later that evening, in the administration wing, Dolly sat alone at a computer terminal, supposedly updating inmate transport logs. Instead, he opened a blank document and began typing methodically. Dates, times, incidents, names. A careful accounting of everything he'd witnessed since joining Coldwater. The document completed, he saved it to a small flash drive he'd purchased from the staff commissary. Evidence, testimony, his own insurance policy, or perhaps his confession. In the guards' break room, Kincaid held court, describing the day's operations as a triumphant reassertion of authority. Most officers nodded along, comforted by the familiar narrative of necessary force, of danger contained. Parker took one for the team, Kincaid concluded, raising his coffee mug in salute. But we showed them who's in charge. Officer Reynolds nodded enthusiastically. Should have seen E-Block. Like turning over a rock and watching the roaches scatter. Martinez, sitting slightly apart, looked less convinced. Still, a guard in the hospital. That's going to bring heat. Good, Kincaid replied. Maybe the administration will finally authorize the measures we've been requesting. Combat pay, expanded solitary facilities, reduced privileges across the board. Dent seems reluctant, Reynolds noted. Dent's a politician, Kincaid dismissed. When the state investigators see what we're dealing with, he'll fall in line or be replaced. After lights out, when the facility settled into its nighttime routine, Chaplain Brooks made his rounds in the solitary unit. A prayer visit officially sanctioned but carefully monitored. At Tone's cell, he paused longer than regulation permitted. They're watching you especially close, Brooks murmured. All the key organizers. Andre? Tone asked. In cell 9. Dent visited him personally earlier. Tone absorbed this with concern. Why would the warden? Unknown. But there's something else you should know. Brooks glanced down the corridor. The young guard, Dolly, he's been asking questions, writing things down. A report? Maybe. Or testimony. Brooks lowered his voice further. And I've heard rumors about footage. Security cameras catching what really happened to Andre. Tone's expression sharpened. We need that footage. Dangerous game, son. This whole place is a dangerous game, Chaplain. Tone's eyes burned with intensity, but it's different when we know the rules, when we have proof. In cell 9, Andre lay on the hard concrete bench, replaying Dent's visit in his mind. The warden's careful words, the implied alliance, the suggestion of leverage against Kincaid. A political calculation, not a moral one, but potentially useful nonetheless. Beyond the concrete walls of solitary, a new current flowed through Coldwater's population. The morning's raids, initially designed to crush resistance, had instead crystallized it. The methodical destruction of personal items, photos, letters, Bibles, had struck at dignities more fundamental than freedom. In the laundry facility, an inmate named Vargas carefully removed a small object wrapped in plastic from a cleaning cart and slipped it into his waistband. A contraband cell phone, smuggled in through a compromised delivery driver, valuable beyond measure in an information vacuum. Its first destination, Tone Wilson, whenever he returned to general population. Its purpose, to document what happened behind Coldwater's walls when no official cameras were watching, or when the footage those cameras captured mysteriously disappeared. In his apartment, Dolly stared at the flash drive containing his testimony. A small object with the potential to end careers, to trigger investigations, to bring the weight of state oversight down on Coldwater, to end his own career as well, almost certainly. The right thing and the safe thing had never been further apart. Morning would bring another day of lockdown, another opportunity for provocation, for resistance, for violence, another choice for each soul trapped within Coldwater's walls, inmates and guards alike. The machinery of control had begun to slip, gears grinding against unexpected resistance. And beneath the surface, the current of change continued to flow, gathering strength for whatever came next. The flash drive felt impossibly heavy in Shane Dawley's pocket as he passed through Coldwater's staff security checkpoint. 7 days had passed since the lockdown began, 7 days of escalating tensions. His reassignment to administrative wing had given him unexpected access to computers, files, and most importantly, the surveillance server room during night shifts. It had taken 3 careful nights to locate and copy the footage of Andre's beating. "Everything all right, Dawley?" the security officer asked, noticing his tension. "Fine," Dawley managed. "Just tired. Double shifts." Dawley drove directly to the Jackson Public Library, 40 minutes away. The woman sat at a corner table as described. Middle-aged, red reading glasses, newspaper open before her. Attorney, Marissa Wright had spent 15 years documenting abuses in the state's correctional system. "Ms. Wright?" He approached cautiously. She glanced up. "Officer?" "Just Shane today," he replied, taking the seat opposite. "Thank you for meeting me." He slid the flash drive across the table. "Everything's there. Surveillance footage of the beating, medical reports that don't match official incidents, my personal log of similar incidents." Wright pocketed the drive without examining it. "And you're prepared to go on record?" "Not yet," Dawley admitted. "Maybe not ever, but the evidence speaks for itself." "Evidence without testimony is difficult to leverage," she pointed out. "Someone has to know the truth," Dawley insisted. "What's happening there? It's not corrections. It's cruelty disguised as order." Wright studied him. "How long have you been a correctional officer?" 4 months. "Ah." She nodded, understanding. "Still human." The word stung. "Is that what happens? Everyone just adjusts to it?" "Systems perpetuate themselves," Wright replied. "People either adapt or leave." She leaned forward. "If I use this information, there will be an investigation. People will look for the source. I know the risk. Do you?" Her expression softened. "This isn't just about your job. Officers who breach the code of silence often find themselves threatened, sometimes worse." Wright's parting words echoed in his mind. "I'll review everything tonight. No action for at least 72 hours. Go back to your routine. Change nothing." Inside the facility, 3 days into solitary confinement, Tone Wilson received an unexpected visitor during his attorney consultation period. Vargas, who worked as a trustee in administration, entered wearing a visitor's badge. When the guard stepped outside, he immediately leaned forward. "Got it," he whispered, quickly lifting his shirt to reveal a contraband phone. "Took some serious trading, but it's clean." "How'd you get in here?" Tone asked. "Friend in records. Created a temporary paralegal credential." Vargas grinned. "You'd be amazed what access I have." "Can you get it to general population?" "Better. I can get it to cell 9 after this." Vargas glanced at the door. "Andre needs to know. Something's happening. Guards are talking about a leak, about footage getting out." "What footage?" "Don't know exactly, but Kincaid's tearing the place apart looking for a rat. And there's a state investigation team arriving tomorrow." Tone leaned forward. "Get the phone to Andre. Tell him to document everything." In cell 9, Andre received both the phone and information with careful consideration. That night, during the 2 a.m. medication rounds, he positioned the phone between the cell bars, recording as guards dragged a disoriented inmate named Phillips against the wall after he suffered a seizure, taunting him for faking it, before finally taking him to the infirmary. 3 minutes of footage, irrefutable evidence of medical neglect. Andre sent it through an anonymized messaging app as instructed. In the guard's break room, Kincaid paced like a caged animal, his usual control fracturing. "Someone in this facility is feeding information outside," he announced. "Someone with access to surveillance, to reports, to restricted areas." "Officer," Reynolds shifted uncomfortably. "Could be anyone. Trustees work in administration. Civilians come through for maintenance. It's one of us, Kincaid insisted. No one else would risk it. His gaze swept the room, searching for guilt. Someone's trying to bury us. In his office, Warden Dent received the morning's first crisis. Before sunrise, a call from the Department of Corrections Commissioner himself. "There's a video circulating, Harold," Commissioner Taylor began without preamble. "Shows your officers manhandling an inmate having a medical emergency. It's already reached advocacy groups and local news." Dent's grip tightened on the phone. "When was this recorded?" "Timestamp says 2:14 this morning. It's authentic, Harold. And it's damaging." "The investigation team arriving today has been expanded," Taylor continued. "Full facility review. All incident reports for the past 6 months, all surveillance procedures. Commissioner, we're already managing a tense situation following the assault on Officer Parker. And now we're managing a potential civil rights investigation." Taylor cut him off. "Fix this, Harold. Find the source of the leak, or I'll find someone who can." Lieutenant Voss entered moments after the call ended. "Sir, there's a situation developing." "Another leak?" Dent stated flatly. "Yes, sir. And Sergeant Kincaid is escalating. He's ordered invasive searches of staff lockers and vehicles. He's demanding access to the surveillance server logs." "On whose authority?" Dent demanded. "His own," Voss replied. "He's targeting specific officers, particularly Dolly." "Where is he now?" "Administrative wing, as you reassigned him." But Kincaid suggesting the reassignment was suspicious timing. Dent moved to the window, staring out at the empty prison yard. "The leak puts us all at risk," Voss continued. "If the investigation expands to include administrative decisions, the chain of command," she let the implication hang. "You think I should sacrifice Kincaid?" Dent surmised. "I think you need to make a strategic decision, sir. Kincaid is a liability now." Her voice took on a sharper edge. "You either burn Kincaid or burn with him." The clear move was to distance himself from Kincaid, to frame the sergeant as a rogue element. So why did it feel like a betrayal of something deeper? "Draft a preliminary statement," he decided. "No names, no specifics." After Voss departed, Dent removed his flash drive, insurance that now felt more like evidence. He began drafting a memo documenting his recent discovery of procedural violations within the facility, covering his tracks, rewriting history, preparing sacrifices. In the administrative wing, Dolly filed paperwork with mechanical efficiency, fighting to maintain normalcy. When Kincaid appeared in the doorway, his heart nearly stopped. "Officer Dolly," Kincaid's voice was deceptively casual. "Just the man I was looking for." They moved through the administrative corridor until reaching a maintenance hallway, a blind spot in the surveillance coverage. Kincaid's hand shot out, slamming Dolly against the wall, forearm pressed against his throat. "You think I don't know?" Kincaid hissed. "You think I can't tell a rat when I see one?" "I don't," Dolly gasped. "Shut up. I've been watching you since E-Block. Your weakness, your sympathy." He spat the word like a curse. "Then suddenly you're reassigned to administration, access to files, to computers." "The warden moved me," Dolly managed. "The warden," Kincaid repeated with contempt. "Well, this isn't politics, Dolly. This is survival. And let me make something very clear." His forearm pressed harder. "There's no escape from this place, not even after you leave." He released the pressure slightly. "We know who you are now. There are officers in every department in this state, every agency. You'll never work in corrections again. You'll be looking over your shoulder for the rest of your life." Dolly struggled to maintain eye contact. "Is that what happened to the others? The ones who spoke up before? They were weak, just like you," Kincaid growled. "This is war, against animals who'd cut your throat, against politicians who've never spent a day containing the violence we face." He stepped back, straightening his uniform. "I'm watching you, Dolly. One wrong move and you'll find yourself in a cell block filled with inmates who know exactly who you are." The threat wasn't idle. Dolly had heard stories, officers who broke the code finding themselves assigned to dangerous posts without backup, mysteriously alone with violent inmates. In the solitary unit, Andre was surprised when his cell door opened outside scheduled movement. A guard escorted him to a small interview room within the solitary unit itself. No cameras, he noted. Warden Dent entered alone. "Mr. Coates," he began without preamble, "we have a significant problem." Andre said nothing. "There's a new video circulating. Inmate Phillips being mishandled during a medical emergency, taken from inside these cells." Dent's gaze was penetrating. "You wouldn't know anything about that?" "Should I?" Andre replied. "Don't play games," Dent snapped. "A state investigation team arrives today." "Good," Andre said simply. "You think this helps? Exposing isolated incidents? All it does is harden positions. They'll crack down harder, restrict more privileges. Unless someone with authority stands up," Andre countered. "Someone who has evidence of systematic problems." Understanding passed between them. Dent knew that Andre knew about his surveillance footage. "What exactly do you want, Coates?" "Basic dignity. Consistent rules applied equally regardless of race. Medical treatment that doesn't depend on an officer's mood. Freedom from targeted harassment." "There's another video," Andre continued when Dent remained silent. "Guards conducting compliance checks in E-Block. That one goes public tomorrow unless meaningful changes begin." "You're not in a position to make demands," Dent warned. "Neither are you," Andre countered. "Not anymore." Their standoff was interrupted by Dent's radio. "Warden, you're needed in admin immediately. Situation developing." The situation became clear as soon as Dent reached the administrative building. State investigators had arrived early, 4 officials with Department of Corrections identification, and a federal civil rights attorney. They'd installed themselves in the main conference room, requesting immediate access to all incident reports and surveillance logs. A small local news crew had positioned themselves outside Coldwater's main entrance, reporting on the leaked video. Lieutenant Voss intercepted Dent. "It's spiraling. Kincaid is threatening to have officers walk out in protest. The state team is demanding immediate interviews." Dent straightened his tie, shifting into crisis management mode. "Where's the press statement I asked you to draft?" "Here, sir." She handed him a tablet. "I've added a few elements, an expression of shock, a commitment to identifying procedural failures." Dent recognized the subtle positioning. Voss was creating distance between administration and line officers, preparing scapegoats while protecting leadership. "Issue it immediately," he decided, "then assemble all department heads." As Dent entered the administrative corridor, guards clustered in small groups, conversations stopping as he passed. At the far end, Sergeant Kincaid stood watching, his expression cold and evaluating. In the solitary unit, Andre was returned to his cell, where Tone awaited news through the plumbing pipes. "It's happening," Andre confirmed softly. "Investigation. Team on site. Press outside. Dent on the defensive." "Phase 2 then?" Tone's voice echoed back. Andre hesitated. The plan had always been escalation, more videos, more exposure, but something in Dent's demeanor gave him pause. "Hold on the next video," Andre decided. "Let's see how Dent plays this first." "You trust him?" Tone sounded incredulous. "I trust his ambition," Andre clarified. "And right now it might align with our interests." Throughout the facility, the atmosphere tightened like a spring under compression. Guards increased their vigilance, more aggressive. Inmates responded with heightened wariness, with whispered contingency plans. Dolly's radio crackled with a facility-wide announcement. "Attention all personnel. Effective immediately, Coldwater Correctional Facility is operating under riot warning protocols. All non-essential movement is suspended." Dolly's blood ran cold. Riot warning. The precursor to full lockdown, to extraction teams, to authorize deadly force. There had been no riot, no mass disturbance, no violence beyond what the guards themselves had initiated. But the designation changed everything, creating a legal framework for whatever happened next, a preemptive justification. As darkness, fell over Coldwater, the machinery of institutional violence prepared for war. Kincaid gathered his most loyal officers, distributing riot gear, preparing for what he framed as inevitable resistance. The truth was out, captured in digital fragments shared beyond Coldwater's walls. But the cost of speaking it was rising by the hour. A reckoning approached, its shape still undefined, but its inevitability now certain. The morning sun cast long shadows across Coldwater's yard as the state investigation team established their command center in the facility's conference room. Their presence had transformed the prison's atmosphere overnight, a foreign body injected into Coldwater's bloodstream, triggering fever and inflammation. Andre Coates sat in the same interview room where Warden Dent had confronted him the day before. This time he faced two state investigators, a stern-faced black woman named Dr. Williams and a younger white man who introduced himself simply as Mr. Hayes from the Attorney General's office. "We've reviewed the footage that's been circulating," Dr. Williams began, her voice measured and professional. "And we've examined your medical records. The discrepancies are significant." Andre remained silent, evaluating. "We're here to understand patterns, Mr. Coates, not just isolated incidents," she continued. "What happened to you appears to be part of a larger systemic issue." "And if it is?" Andre finally spoke. "Then there will be accountability," Hayes interjected. "But we need testimony, documentation, witnesses willing to go on record." Andre considered his response carefully. "Witnesses face retaliation. That's how the system protects itself." "We can offer certain protections," Hayes assured him. Andre smiled thinly. "In here?" The question hung between them, its implications clear. No protection could reach inside Coldwater's walls, not while the same power structure remained intact. "Mr. Coates," Dr. Williams leaned forward, "we've initiated this investigation based on evidence of civil rights violations. But without cooperation from those directly affected, our options are limited." Andre studied her face, looking for sincerity, for commitment beyond bureaucratic obligation. "I need to consult with others," he said finally. "This doesn't just affect me." In the administration wing, Warden Dent faced his own interrogation. Commissioner Taylor had arrived personally, accompanied by the department's legal counsel. "This is a disaster, Harold," Taylor began, pacing the office. 2 videos in 3 days, civil rights lawyers circling, the governor's office calling, me directly. "The incidents are being thoroughly investigated," Dent replied smoothly. "As you know, I've been implementing progressive reform since my appointment. These videos represent isolated failures, not institutional policy." "Bullshit." Taylor stopped pacing. "I've seen the preliminary reports. The pattern is clear. Targeted enforcement, discriminatory discipline, excessive force, all heavily skewed along racial lines." "Commissioner?" "Save it," Taylor cut him off. "The question isn't whether there's a problem. It's how deep it goes and who takes the fall." He leaned against Dent's desk. "You were sent here to clean this place up, Harold. Instead, it's turned into a potential federal case on your watch." Dent maintained his composure with effort. "I inherited a deeply entrenched culture. Change takes time." "Time's up," Taylor replied flatly. "Either you contain this immediately, or the governor will appoint someone who can." After they left, Dent sat alone, fingers drumming on his desk. The flash drive containing the original footage of Andre's beating seemed to pulse in his drawer like a ticking bomb. His political calculation had shifted overnight, from whether to sacrifice Kincaid to how to do it most advantageously. He picked up his phone and dialed Lieutenant Voss's extension. "Find Sergeant Kincaid. I need to see him immediately." In the prison yard, tension coiled through the air like electrical current. The facility remained under riot warning status, but inmates had been allowed limited movement to prevent the appearance of collective punishment during the investigation. Tone Wilson, released from solitary that morning, stood near the basketball court, carefully orchestrating what appeared to be casual conversations. Information flowed through his network: which guards had been interviewed, which inmates had been questioned, which blocks were under heightened surveillance. Officer Dawley supervised the yard rotation with nervous vigilance. Kincaid had been conspicuously absent that morning, But his loyal officers, Reynolds, Garcia, Martinez, watched Dolly with undisguised hostility. The thin blue line had never felt more tangible or more threatening. "Hey, rookie," Reynolds called out, approaching with deliberate slowness. "Heard you've been busy, writing reports, taking meetings." Dolly maintained professional distance. "Just doing my job, Reynolds." "Your job," Reynolds repeated with contempt. "Your job is standing with your brothers, not feeding the vultures circling this place." "If officers followed procedure, there wouldn't be vultures," Dolly replied, immediately regretting the words. Reynolds stepped closer. "You think you know something about procedure? About what it takes to control animals who'd gut you for looking at them wrong?" His voice dropped. "Kincaid's looking for you. Says he has some questions about server access, logs, timestamps that match your shifts." The threat hung in the air between them. Dolly's stomach tightened, but he maintained eye contact. "I've got nothing to hide." "We'll see," Reynolds smirked, turning away. "We'll definitely see." Across the yard, Chaplain Brooks approached Tone, Bible in hand as always, a prop that justified their conversation in the guard's eyes. "Investigation team interviewed 6 men from E Block this morning," Brooks murmured, pretending to discuss scripture. "They've requisitioned complete medical records going back 18 months. "Andre?" Tone asked quietly. "With them now. Wardens in crisis meetings with state officials." Brooks glanced around cautiously. "Something's coming to a head. Kincaid was called to admin an hour ago. Came out looking like he'd seen a ghost." Tone absorbed this information, adjusting his mental calculations. "We need to accelerate. Get word to Vargas. The next video goes out today, not tomorrow. That risks—" "Everything's already at risk," Tone cut him off. "Momentum matters now. If they're wobbling, we push harder." In the administrative building, Kincaid stood before Dent's desk, rigid with barely contained fury. "You wanted to see me, Warden?" His voice was cold, formal. "Sit down, Sergeant." Dent gestured to the chair opposite. "I prefer to stand." Dent studied him briefly. "As you wish. I'll be direct. The state investigation has expanded to include a comprehensive review of use of force incidents. Your name appears prominently in their preliminary findings." "I maintain order in a maximum security facility," Kincaid replied stiffly. "Force is sometimes necessary." "The pattern suggests more than necessity, Sergeant. It suggests a systematic approach to discipline that disproportionately targets certain inmates." Dent slid a folder across the desk. "This is troubling reading." Kincaid didn't touch the folder. "So that's it? You're hanging me out to dry, scapegoating line officers, while administration claims ignorance? I'm giving you an opportunity, Ray," Dent said, voice softening slightly. "Administrative leave effective immediately. Full pay while the investigation proceeds. Distance between your actions and current facility leadership." "Understanding." Darkened Kincaid's face. "You knew. All along you knew what was happening in the blocks. You had the footage. You let it continue because it was convenient until it wasn't." "That's not—" "Save your political bullshit," Kincaid snarled. "You want me gone? Make it official. Paperwork. Charges. The works. Because I'm not slinking away to make your life easier." Dent's expression hardened. "That's your choice, Sergeant. But be clear about the consequences. Without administrative leave as a buffer, you'll face the full weight of the investigation. Your record, your pension, your freedom, all at risk." "Threats, Warden?" Kincaid's smile was cold. "I've got 18 years of maintaining order in this hellhole. 18 years of doing the dirty work you administrators pretend doesn't happen. You think I went into this profession without insurance?" The implication hung between them. Kincaid had his own evidence, his own leverage, his own ability to spread blame upward. "This conversation is over," Dent said finally. "You're suspended. Pending review, Sergeant. Turn in your credentials and clear out your locker. Security will escort you off the premises." As Kincaid turned to leave, he paused at the door. "You think getting rid of me solves your problem? I'm just a symptom, Warden. The disease is built. into the walls of this place. His eyes bore into Dent's. And it's spreading. The yard emptied as afternoon count approached. Inmates returned to their blocks, guards to their stations. The facility settled into the rhythmic procedure of verifying every body was where it belonged, a ritual of control that had defined Coldwater for decades. Dolly found himself assigned to E-block count, a detail he suspected was deliberate, putting him back in the place where everything had started. As he moved down the tier, calling out numbers, checking faces against his roster, he felt the weight of watching eyes, inmates studying him with new interest, guards monitoring his every move. When he reached Andre's cell, their eyes met briefly. A moment of silent recognition passed between them. Not quite alliance, but mutual acknowledgement of the roles they'd chosen in the unfolding drama. 217, Coates, Dolly announced formally. Present, Andre replied, standing at attention as required. After count completed, Dolly headed toward the staff exit. He'd nearly reached the security checkpoint when Officer Martinez intercepted him. Kincaid wants to see you, Martinez said without preamble. Supply closet by the laundry. Dolly's pulse quickened. I'm off shift in 10 minutes. This won't wait, Martinez insisted. He says it's about your future at Coldwater. The threat wasn't subtle. Dolly glanced toward the checkpoint, weighing his options. Running would only confirm guilt. Reporting the summons would escalate tensions further. Lead the way, he decided finally. The corridor to the laundry facility was eerily deserted. No inmates on work detail, no passing guards. Martinez left him at the supply closet door with a final warning glance before disappearing around the corner. Kincaid waited inside, uniform, crisp despite the circumstances, eyes burning with cold fury. Officer Dolly, he said quietly, closing the door behind them. The rat himself. Sergeant? Dolly acknowledged, struggling to keep his voice steady. I heard you've been suspended. Temporarily, Kincaid replied. A bureaucratic formality while the politicians cover their asses. He moved closer. You think you're solving something? Exposing some great injustice? I think the truth matters, Dolly replied. Kincaid laughed humorlessly. Truth? You don't know the first thing about truth in this place. You've been here 4 months. I've spent my life controlling the violence these walls barely contain. By creating more violence, Dolly challenged. By establishing consequences, Kincaid corrected sharply. Without fear, without immediate, painful response to disobedience, this whole system collapses. Maybe it should, Dolly said quietly. Something dangerous flickered in Kincaid's eyes. And there it is, the bleeding heart revealed. His hand moved to his belt, to the baton secured there. You know what happens to rats, Dolly? Before he could continue, the door burst open. Lieutenant Voss stood in the doorway, 2 security officers behind her. Sergeant Kincaid, she said crisply. You're in violation of your suspension terms. These officers will escort you from the facility immediately. Kincaid's hand fell away from his baton. His gaze shifted from Dolly to Voss, calculating, evaluating. Finally, he straightened his uniform. This isn't over, he said quietly. The words meant for Dolly alone. As security led Kincaid away, Voss turned to Dolly. Officer Garcia spotted you being led here. He was concerned enough to report it. Dolly blinked in surprise. Garcia, Kincaid's loyal soldier, had warned someone. The alliances within Coldwater were shifting faster than anyone could track. Thank you, Lieutenant, he managed. Don't thank me, Voss replied coolly. This isn't about you. It's about containing a situation that threatens this institution. She studied him briefly. The warden wants to see you. His office, 0800 tomorrow. As evening fell on Coldwater, word of Kincaid's suspension spread through the facility like wildfire. Guards clustered in break rooms, debating implications, choosing sides. Inmates tracked the shifting power dynamics with careful attention, sensing opportunity in the disruption. In the surveillance room, Dent watched the facility's cameras with heightened vigilance. The flash drive now lay on his desk, its contents fully reviewed, his strategy finalized. The time for half measures had passed. Somewhere in Jackson, attorney Marissa Wright submitted a formal request to the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division, attaching selected evidence from Dolly's flash drive. The wheels of external oversight, slow but inexorable, began to turn. And throughout Coldwater's cell blocks, inmates prepared for whatever came next, some fashioning weapons from contraband materials, others establishing communication networks, many simply waiting, watching. The next 24 hours would determine whether Coldwater bent toward reform or broke under the weight of its own contradictions. The match had been struck. The only question was how large the fire would grow. Dawn broke over Coldwater with unusual activity at the main gate. A convoy of black SUVs with federal government plates rolled through security, escorted by state police vehicles. The Department of Justice had arrived. Inside the administration building, Warden Dent stood at his window, watching the procession with grim resignation. On his desk lay a brown envelope containing a flash drive and a carefully crafted memo documenting his recent discovery of concerning patterns at the facility. His insurance policy, revised and fine-tuned over sleepless nights. Lieutenant Voss knocked and entered without waiting for acknowledgement. "They're here. 6 DOJ attorneys, 4 investigators, 2 digital forensics specialists, plus state oversight. Conference room prepared?" "Yes, sir, and I've assembled the files you requested." Voss placed another folder on his desk. Staff disciplinary records, incident reports, everything properly contextualized. Her emphasis on the last word spoke volumes. The records had been curated to support their emerging narrative. A few bad actors operating against administration policy, a reform-minded warden discovering and addressing misconduct. "And Kincaid?" Dent asked. "His union representative is demanding a formal hearing before termination proceedings. Says they'll fight any attempt to make him the scapegoat for institutional failures." Dent smiled thinly. "Of course they will." In the solitary wing, Andre was surprised by an early morning visitor. Not guards or investigators, but Chaplain Brooks. "They're releasing you back to general population," Brooks informed him quietly. "DOJ request. They want to interview you in a more neutral setting." "When?" "Now. I'm to escort you." As they walked the connecting corridor, Brooks added, "Federal agents took custody of all medical records and surveillance footage this morning. Dr. Michaels, the one who documented your injuries, has been interviewed for 3 hours already." Andre absorbed this silently, calculating the implications. The doctor had been thorough in his examination after the beating, noting details that contradicted the official narrative of resistance and self-inflicted injuries. One more thread in the unraveling tapestry of Coldwater's deceptions. In the yard, Officer Dawley stood at his post, watching inmates move with heightened tension through their morning routine. His meeting with Warden Dent had been rescheduled, then canceled as federal authorities established operational control over the facility. Garcia approached surprisingly alone. "Feds want to talk to you," he said without preamble. "Interview room 4. "When?" "Now." Garcia hesitated, then added, "They've got your flash drive, Dolly, the one you gave to that lawyer in Jackson. They know it came from you." Dolly's blood ran cold. "How do you—" "Because I'm the one who told Voss about Kincaid taking you to that supply closet," Garcia cut him off. "I made my choice. Now we all live with consequences." In interview room 4, a stern-faced DOJ attorney named Chambers and a civil rights investigator named Powell waited for Dolly. "Officer Dolly," Chambers began, "we have evidence that you provided confidential facility surveillance footage to outside parties. That's a serious breach of protocol." Dolly sat ramrod straight. "Yes, ma'am." "You're not denying it?" "No, ma'am." Powell leaned forward. "Why take that risk, Officer Dolly? 4 months on the job, promising career ahead of you. Why throw it away?" Dolly considered his answer carefully. "Because what I witnessed wasn't correction or discipline. It was abuse sanctioned by the system. Hiding it would make me complicit." "And you have first-hand knowledge of these incidents?" Chambers pressed. I do. Starting with Andre Coates' beating in E-Block. I was there. I saw Sergeant Kincaid plant contraband and then assault an inmate who wasn't resisting. Were there other witnesses? Officer Garcia. He saw everything I did. Dolly paused. I think that's why he warned Voss about Kincaid cornering me yesterday. He's trapped between the code and his conscience. The investigators exchanged glances. We'll need your full statement, Powell said finally. Every incident you witnessed, every conversation about these practices, every indication of systemic, rather than isolated misconduct. Dolly nodded, relief and dread mingling in his chest. The truth would cost him his career, possibly his safety, but the weight of silence had become too heavy to bear. In the prison's medical wing, Dr. Michaels nervously organized patient files under the watchful eye of a DOJ evidence specialist. He'd been at Coldwater for just 8 months, a job he'd taken out of financial necessity rather than choice. Now his meticulous record-keeping put him at the center of a federal investigation. These are all incidents involving excessive force, claims, he explained, sliding a folder across the desk. I've documented injuries inconsistent with official reports in approximately 63% of cases. And you reported these discrepancies, the specialist asked. Dr. Michaels looked away. I noted them in the medical files, but didn't escalate them, didn't flag them for administrative review. The one time I tried, he swallowed hard. I was told my contract wouldn't be renewed if I created problems. Who told you that? Lieutenant Voss. In the administration building, Warden Dent's carefully constructed narrative began to crumble. 3 separate interviews had yielded 3 damning connections between administration and the abusive practices they now sought to disavow. A medical technician revealed that injury reports were routinely edited before submission to state oversight. A records clerk confirmed that black inmates received disciplinary citations at 3 times the rate of white inmates for identical infractions. And most damaging, Officer Martinez, sensing which way the wind was blowing, had detailed how Voss directly approved enhanced compliance measures in specific blocks. By midday, the facility entered full administrative lockdown, not for security this time, but for comprehensive inspection. Teams of investigators moved through each block, methodically documenting conditions, interviewing inmates, reviewing local records. In E-Block, Andre sat with 2 DOJ civil rights attorneys. His words measured and precise as he detailed not just his own experience, but the broader pattern of targeted enforcement, racial disparity, and systematic intimidation that defined life at Coldwater. This wasn't about a few bad guards, he explained, voice steady. This was policy. Unwritten, but understood by everyone. Certain inmates, usually black, usually those with leadership qualities, received special attention. Extra searches, reduced privileges, fabricated infractions. And Sergeant Kincaid? He was the enforcer but not the architect, Andre clarified. The system existed before him. He just perfected it. Across the facility, Tone Wilson provided corroborating testimony, along with access to the contraband phone containing additional videos of guard misconduct. Rather than facing charges for the contraband, he received immunity in exchange for cooperation, a development that spoke volumes about the investigation's priorities. In the staff locker room, news of Martinez's cooperation spread like wildfire. The thin blue line was fracturing as self-preservation overtook solidarity. Guards who had participated in or witnessed abuses began approaching investigators independently, each hoping to position themselves as reluctant participants rather than enthusiastic enforcers. Kincaid, banned from the facility but not yet terminated, waited in the parking lot of a gas station 5 miles from Coldwater. His phone had been buzzing constantly with updates from the few officers still loyal to him, each message darker than the last. Martinez talking. Medical records seized. Inmates given credibility. The system turning on itself. When Reynolds called to report that federal agents were reviewing specific incidents involving E-Block inmates, something inside Kincaid snapped. 18 years of maintaining order, of doing the necessary but unacknowledged work of controlling. Animals who understood only force, all of it now being reframed as abuse, as misconduct, as criminality. "They want a villain," he muttered, starting his truck. "I'll give them one." Using his still-active keycard, Kincaid entered Coldwater through a service entrance, avoiding the main security checkpoint. The facility's lockdown worked to his advantage. Corridors empty, attention focused elsewhere. He moved with purpose toward E-Block, a small package concealed in his jacket. His plan was simple, desperate: plant irrefutable contraband in Andre Coates' cell. Drugs, a weapon, evidence to discredit the key witness, to cast doubt on the entire investigation. One last effort to rebalance the scales. He nearly reached E-Block undetected when he rounded a corner and came face to face with Dolly. For a moment, they simply stared at each other. The veteran enforcer and the rookie whistleblower, the past and future of corrections colliding in an empty hallway. "You shouldn't be here," Dolly said finally, hand moving slowly toward his radio. "Neither should you," Kincaid replied, eyes cold. "Rats belong in traps, not wearing badges." "It's over, Sergeant. Federal investigation, state oversight. There's nowhere to hide anymore." Kincaid laughed, a harsh, broken sound. "Hide? I've spent my career doing what needed to be done while people like you looked away. The only difference now is you suddenly found a conscience when it became convenient." "I'm reporting your presence," Dolly said, unclipping his radio. Kincaid moved with surprising speed, knocking the radio away and shoving Dolly against the wall. "You think this ends with me? You think sacrificing one sergeant fixes what's broken in this place?" His voice rose. "This whole system runs on controlled violence, always has. The only question is who controls it." The package fell from his jacket during the scuffle, a small bag containing white powder and a crude shiv. Dolly's eyes widened in understanding. "You were going to plant that on Coates," he realized. "Frame him." "Last chance, rookie," Kincaid snarled. "Walk away. Forget you saw me." Before Dolly could respond, the unmistakable electronic tone of a camera shutter sounded from nearby. Both men turned to see Vargas, the administration trustee, holding a contraband phone, its camera lens aimed directly at them and the fallen. Evidence. "Smile for the feds, Sergeant," Vargas said calmly. "This one's going straight to the DOJ team." Kincaid lunged toward him, but it was too late. The image had already been sent. The last piece of his control slipped away, captured in digital pixels and transmitted beyond his reach. By evening, Kincaid was in custody, charged with witness tampering and obstruction of justice. Latine Voss had been placed on administrative leave pending further investigation. And Warden Dent found himself answering uncomfortable questions about his knowledge of and involvement in the abusive practices that had defined Coldwater under his watch. In the chapel, Andre met with Tone, Chaplain Brooks, and several other inmate representatives from different blocks. The facility remained under lockdown, but religious gatherings had been permitted under supervision, a small concession that provided crucial space for planning. "DOJ is establishing a consent decree," Andre explained quietly. "Federal oversight of facility operations, independent review of disciplinary procedures, new grievance protocols." "And the guards who participated?" Tone asked. "Some will face charges, others will be dismissed, many will simply be reassigned." Andre's expression was realistic rather than triumphant. The system protects its own, even in defeat. "So what did we really achieve?" another inmate asked bitterly. "Visibility," Andre replied. "The darkness thrives on secrecy. We brought light." "And next time something happens?" Brooks questioned. Andre held up his hand, where a small memory card was concealed. "Technology has changed the game. Every cell, every block, every corner of this place can be documented now. They can take phones, but they can't stop information." The following morning, as dawn broke over Coldwater once again, transfer buses arrived. The DOJ had ordered immediate relocation of key witnesses, including Andre and Tone, to other facilities during the investigation. A protection measure, officially. A disruption tactic, in reality. As Andre gathered his few remaining possessions, Dolly appeared at his cell door. "Transfer detail," the young officer explained, voice carefully professional though his eyes conveyed more. As they walked toward the processing center, Dolly spoke quietly. "They're saying it could be a year before the investigation concludes. Federal takeover of operations in the meantime." "Will you stay?" Andre asked. Dolly shook his head. "My testimony ended any future in corrections, but I don't regret it." At the transfer bus, Andre paused, looking back at the facility that had been his prison, both literally and figuratively, for nearly 3 years. The concrete walls, the razor wire, the watchful towers remained unchanged. But something fundamental had shifted inside. "It won't be fixed," Dolly said, following his gaze. "Not completely." "No," Andre agreed. "But it's been seen, and that's where change begins." As the bus pulled away from Coldwater Correctional Facility, Andre closed his eyes, feeling the weight of victory and its cost. He wasn't free. His sentence remained to be served. But in forcing the truth into the light, he had found a different kind of freedom. Behind them, the machinery of justice, slow, imperfect but inexorable, continued its work. Interviews and evidence collection, reports and recommendations. The system examining itself with reluctant thoroughness. Coldwater would never return to what it had been. The walls that had contained men's bodies had failed to contain their truth. And in that failure lay the seeds of something new, not perfect, but perhaps more just. For now, that would have to be enough. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.